Hello, and welcome to The Executive Appeal, a show that convenes the world's most powerful and successful leaders to share mentoring and career advancement advice to help you successfully transition into senior level executive positions. I'm your host, Alex Tremble, award-winning speaker, author, and leadership expert with over a decade of experience coaching and advising some of our nation's most senior level government leaders. So if you're ready to reach your goals, let's get started. Hey, welcome, you amazing, beautiful people to another episode of the Executive Appeal Podcast. The podcast where brilliant leaders from every corner of the world share their secrets to help you lead smarter, influence better, and succeed faster. Think of it as a cheat code to navigate leadership with clarity and confidence. And I'm your host, Alex D. Tremble, CEO of GPS Leadership Solutions. And over the past decade, I've had the privilege of helping executives at Fortune 500 companies, at government agencies, and larger organizations all across the world navigate leadership, influence, and culture. This podcast is your shortcut to learn what works from the best of the best. And again, you are in for a huge treat today. And I promise you this, what you're about to hear isn't theory. It's proven strategies you can use today. And before we jump in, here's a tiny request with a massive ripple effect. Please hit that like button. Why? Because your attention, we're in an attention economy. Your click is the fuel that powers the life-changing ideas that reach more people. And you know what? It's not just a click. It truly is the ability to change and impact lives. You're not just liking, you're leading a movement. Pretty powerful, right? For one little click. So now, let's make today extraordinary together. I'm extremely excited to say today is a good day. With no further ado, let me introduce the amazing man of the hour, Mr. Tony Butler-Sims. Tony serves as the Chief Operating Officer at the Center for International Private Enterprise. With over 30 years of experience as a dedicated HR practitioner, Tony has worked in private, nonprofit, and business sectors. But before joining this organization he's with now, he served as the Director of Human Resources and Administration at Cardno Emerging Markets. He's been a Chief People Officer. He's overseen operations in Asia, Africa, America, Europe, the Middle East. I mean, the guy has literally been, I feel like he's been everywhere. His career has also includes senior director roles at federal government contractors in Northern Virginia. A U.S. Army veteran, Tony served as it. I just have to say, he served in distinction. And again, what he has done, and so many like him have done to support us as individuals across the world, and especially in America, is just amazing. Finally, Tony is a founding member of SHRM Executive Network, currently serves as the president-elect of the board of the District of Columbia chapter of SHRM, and is an official member of the Forbes Human Resource Council and an HR Leadership Forum. How are you doing tonight, kind sir?
Alex, thank you so much for that great introduction. I am doing great today, and I'm looking forward to this spirited conversation that we're going to have that would provide some context into how we navigate the landscape of being an executive in the HR space.
Well, two things really quickly. One, I do feel like I may need to create a separate podcast episode just to list everything that you've done. And two, I think it is very timely to have you on here because I literally just having a conversation with one of our clients right now who is working in a situation where they have a really wonderful team. And they are themselves a spectacular leader, again, at the executive level in the HR arena. And the challenge they're having, which we're working with them on, is how do you create an environment where your team members are more proactive, right? There is a sense that many people are waiting for this leader to give them the heads up, give them the check, give them the thumbs up to move forward or tell them what to do um, versus them just jumping in. So I guess my initial question for you is, when you're an executive leader, especially in this space, how do you make sure that you have a team around you that doesn't rely on you to do everything? That's the first question.
Alex, I think that's a loaded question. But what I will actually say is it's all about the team that you assemble first. The second point would be you give your team space. You give them space to be able to be creative, and you also give them the availability and the ability to be able to manage and navigate potentially difficult situations absent you being there to do hand holding. I think that learning by doing, but also learning by making mistakes is the caveat. It is the catapult for individuals to be able to truly understand where their limitations are, but more importantly, where they can go if they think outside of the norm and outside of the box when it comes to decision making.
I couldn't agree with you more. I know I kind of lobbed this softball at you because I wanted to get the kind of conversation rolling. Um, and what it sounds like you're talking about, though, is yes, providing them the space to mess up and to, again, see where they are and their ability, where they are, where they may need to grow, and so on and so forth. But you also have to be very aware that this is a trust building exercise at the end of the day. If they mess up and you yell at them, then they're not going to, no matter what you say you want them to do, they're going to respond to how you reacted.
Absolutely. But I also think that it gives you that opportunity to be a mentor and a coach. So
Mhm.
it puts you into a space where you allow them to either make mistakes or either excel. And then you can actually speak to them about how they actually tweak what it is that they've done, what
Mhm.
they if you were to do it this way, the outcome could have been X. Or if you
Mhm.
were to approach this particular situation with empathy, the response from the individuals that you're speaking with would have potentially been better. So it gives you the opportunity to be a mentor and a coach, but it also gives them the opportunity to receive that level of input. And I also believe that continual feedback on potential performance of your staff members is solely important because if you don't provide them that level of input or guidance or feedback, they're going to be lost in the sauce, if you will. And that puts you as a manager and an executive in a different level where you don't want to actually be.
Well, you said two words that that we hear a lot,
Mhm.
but I think they have different meanings to different people. And so I'd love for you to expound on. You talked about mentoring and coaching. What do you believe is the difference between mentoring and coaching, and when would you use one versus the other?
I know a lot of folks utilize those two terms interchangeably,
Hmm.
but from my standpoint, when I talk about coaching, coaching for me is giving good guidance for people to be have an idea of what good governance means to them. For me, mentoring means something totally different. It means that mentoring could be something that is outside of the workplace. It could mean that I am providing guidance on how to be a good, ethical person, not only in
Hmm.
the workplace, but outside or external from the workplace. So
Hmm.
for me, I try my best to be able to separate both of those things out because I have formal and informal mentees, and I treat them differently depending upon how I navigate the space with them. If it's in the workspace, that's one way that I manage and navigate them. If it is external to the workspace, I navigate and manage that relationship totally different. And I think that we as individuals need to understand that there is a true distinction between the two. And I'm glad that you pointed that out.
Again, you are. I want to say you're preaching, but you're preaching and singing to the choir, and I'm loving the music. I am, and the sermon. I am 100% with you. And if I can add on to that, as I think about mentoring versus coaching, I also think about it in a time as a time component. So
Mhm.
for me, when we're teaching, mentoring, and coaching to our clients and our organizations, the way we position it is coaching requires more time, generally speaking, because you're asking inquisitive questions. So what do you
Yeah.
think about that? How might this work? Why don't you try it? You may mess up. What did you learn from it? Like doing all that stuff versus mentoring can be like, hey, look, I think this is something you should try. This is how it impacted me in the past. And so it's almost like, again, in situations where you need someone to react now, like I need the right answer to have to happen now. Let me just
Mhm.
give you this advice versus we have some time, we have some room for maybe you to even mess up and fail. That's why I'm going to allow you to walk out there on that plank, not in the plank, but I'm going to allow you to walk out on the tightrope and see how you do. And you know what? If you fall, don't worry, we got a net. We're going to catch you.
Yeah.
But I want to allow you that opportunity.
And that's where the whole space of giving individuals the space to be able to expand or contract. And that's where the trust building really comes into place again, because it allows those individuals to think outside of what their norms are. And I'm glad that you framed it in that way, because your audience truly needs to understand that there is a true distinction between the two.
Well, you talked about your mentees. You mentioned your mentees, and so I know this is a bit tongue in cheek. Everyone, I don't want nobody yelling at me or put in the chat box if you want to. It's okay. Your chats only help push this message out more. But now that you're an executive, you got mentees. Like that's your job. You don't need mentors anymore. You've made it. There's nothing else for you to learn, right?
No, that is a myth. Learning is a constant. For me, I've always said that it is something that is evergreen for a lot of individuals, myself included. I don't know what I don't know, and I know that's a cliche, but it's the truth. And you have to be into a space where you're willing and learning, willing and available to accept other
Mm.
people's points of view, other people's opinions, and then be in a space where you can actually learn from folks and say, I'm taking some, all, or none of what it is that you've provided
Mm.
me, and make a decision as you move forward. So for me, sure, I'm sitting in the C-suite, but it doesn't mean that I have all of the answers. I have most of them, but I may not have all of them.
I love that you brought up again. People forget this fact that you brought up. I want to underscore it. Just because you allow someone to give you information does not mean you have to accept it.
Correct.
Um, and on the other side, if you don't choose to allow someone to give you information, then you have no chance to accept it or deny it because you've said that person can't provide me any information. And so one of the points I love to make, I talk about this in my book, Relationships at Work. There's this really amazing Frederick Douglass story. Very briefly, I'll share. Long story short, when he was about like 5-6 years old, he was moved from the plantation into like the Baltimore area and living in a house. And long story short, the mother was the white woman of the house was like actually the kindest person he'd ever met because she had never owned an enslaved person, right? So she didn't know how to treat him. She used to treat him like a kid. And so she would buy him gifts and candy and all kinds of stuff. And she was actually teaching him how to read. And he was like, this is amazing. Until one day, the husband came home early and saw what his wife was doing. And he was like, no. And actually, I'm toning this down, but he said, you will not teach that blank how to read. To teach him how to read would make him unfit to be a slave.
Wow.
And the cool thing about this story is at that moment, Frederick Douglass decided, oh, if I learn how to read, I don't have to be a slave. Like I don't have to suffer these indignities. Let me make sure I learn how to read. So he did everything he could. He bribed little kids, to teach him words on the street by giving them candy, things like that. And the whole point of this story actually is that if he wouldn't have listened to the father, the husband,
Yeah.
he wouldn't have been able to escape. The husband wasn't trying to motivate him. He wasn't trying to encourage him. He didn't like him. But he had valuable information and inspiration that Douglas needed. And so we have to remember that for ourselves. No matter if I like someone or they could hate me. But if what they say can help me be successful, I
Mhm.
should utilize it And just as even I have my best friend who says some information that's not helpful, I should disregard it.
I think you also need to. I appreciate that that story because you have to look at things with a different lens. And when I say with a different lens, is not the half glass full, because the glass is the glass. But you look at it with the understanding that there may be someone that had provided you some level of not guidance, but some level of discouragement. I'll say it to you that way. And then you utilize that force for good when it was meant for your detriment. So
Mhm.
you look at that with a different lens to say, wait a minute. That was a tough lesson for me to learn. However, I'm going
Yeah,
to utilize that and stay positive and move forward because I can utilize that as a springboard and not as an oppression. And I think that that's where we sometimes get lost. And when I say we, I'm saying we collectively as a people.
yeah,
Sometimes
yeah,
we get lost and we're stuck in one space because there's been one person or two people that have told us no.
yeah,
For me, it's never a no, it's a no, not now.
yeah.
So let's move forward. And I think that I'll leave it at that.
Well, so Tone, I'm not sure if you and I talked about the new book I have coming out in January, February timeframe. It's on the different types of relationships at the executive level. So we talk about
Mhm.
detractors, supporters, and advocates. Detractors are those individuals who are undermining you unnecessarily, sorry, intentionally or unintentionally, and so on and so forth. I can talk about that later. But what I want to bring up is, as we had our reviewers, the executive leaders that we serve, we had a number of executive leaders read
Mhm.
this handbook and this workbook, and all of them came back. A large portion of them came back and said, Alex, this is how you frame this is a completely spot on for the different types of relationships that executives need to have or should be wary of. However, your detractors, you say detractors again are people who undermine you intentionally or unintentionally, and you recommend that we be very intentional with monitoring how much time we spend around those people. But they said, but how many of us have actually been motivated by those detractors?
Yeah.
Sometimes detractors are like trying to knock you down, and you're like, oh shoot, I'm gonna work harder. So like, what are your thoughts about that? And does can everyone get that motivation from detractors?
I think everyone should look for that motivation from detractors because the detractors are sent to be one or two things. They're either sent in a space where they want for you to stay where you currently are, or they would like for you to be less than where they are. And that is the piece that I think we continually dismiss. So, yes, that should be utilized as a motivational tool in the space where you can take what those detractors have said to you and utilize that for your good and not specifically to pander, if you will,
Mhm.
to their impressions of where you should be or where you currently are.
So I know we've been going down this path, and I want to continue down it if it's okay. And let me know if you want to go somewhere else. But we've been talking about mentorship. We've been talking about having a personality, consistently being a learner and growing.
Mhm.
Um, I and you again you you allowed me to make my tongue in cheek joke to say that you're not perfect. So I like to know, like, how do you where where do you find those individuals who can help you grow, who can pour into you? How do you where do you find them, and how do you find them?
Okay, well, great question and a great segue here. And I am not here to promote SHRM or anything of that aspect, but I will say to you this. I belong to the SHRM Executive Network, and I have a cohort, a fabulous cohort of 12 individuals. We meet monthly, and that is a safe space for me. It's a safe space in the aspect that we can talk about anything that's happening within an internal or external to our organization and actually pivot and bounce ideas off of. So that's the other is the HR Leadership Forum of the Greater Washington area. My colleagues there, I can actually lean on and lean into, not only to get information from, but provide information to. So we are a support system for the others. The last piece and first and foremost is my DC SHRM cohort, my membership there, my board of directors there. We all have varying information, varying degrees of experiences, where we can lean on each other to provide and get that data that we need. So, as we talked about earlier, as it relates to learning and continual growth and professional development, etc., we have a I have a plethora of places where I can go to find the data that I need. So I would say that the individuals that are listening to this podcast now need to find their tribe. They need to find their group. They need to find the individuals that they actually feel and trust will provide them constant and solid information, because those are the folks that you're going to be able to go to, listen to, and feel actually the need of the information that you're getting, that you're going to be able to trust that data.
So I promise anyone, I don't pay my guest. I didn't pay him to say this stuff. But that was a perfect answer. And I knew this was you're gonna provide the perfect answer, because there's something about you. What I hear and what you're saying is there has to be a level of intentionality.
Yes.
Where the leaders I work with and the people listening to this, what I tend to hear is they want to learn and want to develop, but they're too busy. I have too much stuff on my plate. I have this coming, that coming. Alex, I don't have the space to even find time to go out there and meet people. And what I'm hearing is, because you are so busy, because what you do requires that level of attention to detail, you have to be intentional with your time and picking those places and spaces that where you can put yourself in, that you can learn and grow almost through osmosis. The reality is yes, you absolutely could just go to the bar and hypothetically someone could share some information with you that could change your life. But what's the probability?
That's happened. That's actually happened. But I didn't mean to cut you off, Alex, but you made a great point. And I think that it's all about being intentional of whom you have in your space. Now, typically, we don't get to select who we have in our workspace. All right. And what I mean by that is, I can't hire every daggone person that works in my space, but I can control who I allow in that space. External from my work, what I can also do is I can actually look at whom I want to have in my space in my free time. Are they pouring into me, and am I able to pour into them? If neither of those things are happening, then that relationship actually doesn't work. So those are the pieces that I think that there's a missing component when it comes to whom we allow access to us.
I am the biggest advocate. And again, I say this a little tongue in cheek. And one of my friends does not like how I phrase this, but I do it on purpose. I believe that all healthy relationships are transactional in nature. And that means that I am giving something of myself to you, and you're giving something of yourself to me. If it is only one way, then that means that someone's being used. Even if it's a mentor-mentee relationship, there should still be some sort of value that the mentee is providing to the mentor, even if it's just like the gratitude that they're giving to this person as they're allowing them to grow. And I love that you called out, like, look, I have the ability to select and decide who I'm allowing in my circle, my space. Am I able to pour into them? Can they pour into me? And if they're not, then I need to maybe reevaluate this relationship, or at least the amount of time I spend with this individual.
Yeah. Yes. But I will caveat that with one thing. You're spot on with what you're saying related to it being transactional. However, I would caveat it by saying that there is no expectation that there is a return, quote unquote, on your investment. Because if you go in it looking at it like that, I think you failed not only yourself, but you failed the relationship in and of itself.
I agree with your caveat. If I can, I'd love to explore this.
Yeah.
If you go into it looking for that, then I think in relationships before they even have the opportunity to be
100%.
something.
100%.
And I think maybe then you are, and I talk about this in the workbook, you can reevaluate your relationships periodically, whether
Yeah.
it's quarterly, biannually, annually, and just, I think all too often, again, this is human nature. We fall into habits and we fall
Yeah.
into what is comfortable. And
Mhm.
all too often, if we pause and look back at our life and look who we're hanging around with, look what we're doing, what we're engaging in, if we just take the time to look at it and says, hey, is this in alignment with, is this helping me get to where I say I want to get to? There are
Mhm.
so many things that we say, oh, that's not helping me, but we don't even pause to even look.
I agree with that. And then sometimes we just allow relationships to die without there being any closure. And there's no
Mm,
closure on either side. I may have known why I let this thing wither on the vine, but the other person on the other side is now in that space that's in limbo. Well, can I reach that to that person? Can I ask this
yeah.
question? Can I engage them on X, Y, and Z? And I think that there are times when there's finality in relationships, but then
Mhm,
there are times when relationships just grow apart for
mhm,
whatever natural reasons. And you can allow those things to happen without there being a true separation. I have friends now from my army days that I don't talk to every day. Hell, I don't probably talk to them every month. But when we do reconnect, we knew what we had then, and we knew where we are going as far as our lives and our careers are concerned, and we knew that there is no malice that's there. So I think that by tying those things off, or at least making those things front and center from the beginning, that of whatever that relationship is,
yeah.
that you're starting out on the best foot for it.
So again, I'm loving this conversation again because I literally have a new product that just came out or coming out whenever this is posted. You bring up again two really important points. One, just because you have decided, maybe to spend less time in a relationship,
Yeah.
that is unhealthy, maybe does
Mhm.
not mean that you need to disrespect that person, say they're bad or they are bad. It doesn't mean any of those things. It just means that right now, maybe this is not where you want to allocate all your time. And
Correct.
then you said relationships also shift.
Mhm.
There's a story that I tell a few times when I've told a lot actually when I'm out speaking. Um, there was an executive mentor of mine. When I was young, I I looked at this person so much. This person helped me out tremendously to get to where I am today, and it's kind of be the person I am today. Um, and what happened a few years ago is like, I grew into an executive spot myself. And so I'm an executive, this person's an executive, and we had a disagreement on ideas. And this person yelled at me, they cursed at me, they hung up the phone on me, and refused to respond to my emails and my text messages and phone calls. And what I realized afterwards is that as I had elevated myself in my career and who I was, and I saw us now as peers having a
Mhm.
difficult conversation about a topic, this person still saw me. They had anchored me as
Yeah.
the intern I was when I was working for them a long time ago. And how dare I challenge their idea? And so,
Yeah.
like I said, relationships shift, and we need to be very aware of that as well.
Well, you have to be aware of that, but you also have to understand that it is okay for those relationships to shift. It is
Absolutely.
okay for those relationships to fade. And it's totally okay that we may have missed the signs that that individual was that person all along. And that's totally fine, because we're human, we're people. We sometimes idolize folks. Sometimes they put people on a pedestal. When not saying that it's not due that they should be there, it is more so on the aspect of what do we do once they get there? What
Mhm,
happens when I am next to them on that same pedestal? Are
mhm,
they ready to share that space? Are they ready to share the limelight? Are they really ready for this individual that they've groomed to be them 2.0? We don't
mhm.
know. So you really have to really think through that as you navigate your careers.
I think this also to kind of now takes us this idea that I have. I want to write something on it. I'm not sure how to write it just yet or just phrase it, but it's just the fact that two things can be right. Two opposing ideas can be right. Can someone be an a-hole? Absolutely. Can someone have helped you out tremendously? Absolutely. Both those things can be right.
Yes.
And I think way too many of us as a people want to pick a black or white situation and say, this person is good, this person is bad, but that's not how it works. And if we can pull ourselves away from that, maybe, and step back and just observe behaviors in different situations, we can say, oh, in these situations, maybe, or in these situations, maybe. And that is, I think, much more productive than trying to box people into what again, a good person or bad person.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. This person may be good at X,
Mm.
and we know that they suck at Y.
Hmm.
So we're not going to invite them into a space to talk about Y at all. So,
Yeah.
so I think it goes back to knowing your audience, knowing the product that you're
Hmm.
trying to present, and
Hmm.
knowing who and where you can get the best piece and from whom. And that's the piece that's there. Yeah.
Well, I'd love to, again, really quickly shift. I know we have only so much time. This is my last question. I'm opening the floor for you.
Okay.
Um, what is the biggest challenge you've seen in developing other executive leaders? What's the biggest challenge hurdle?
I think the biggest challenge is always going to be, and it has been for me, is that it is very difficult for individuals to change. Um, when we talk about change management, we're just not talking about organizational change. We're actually talking about shifting people's mindset from thinking about their little box. And when I say box, I'm talking about someone's department. So they're no longer thinking in this one little space that they're championing the folks that are in their departments, that they are actually championing what's best for the organization across as a whole. Me sitting in my space, I have to look at that across the organization as a whole. I can't just solely think one dimensional. I have to think about what's happening across the organization. So that's the major piece that I feel that there is indeed a disconnect when you're really trying to have that conversation with executives on how they shift their thinking, how they view things with a different lens, and how they can be better as leaders for the organization and not just one specific area of responsibility that they have.
Now I'm going to give, again, I know it's a hard question to throw at you the last minute. How would you recommend someone overcome that challenge?
I think it's really it's self-reflection.
Mm.
It starts there, and it's really giving yourself space to understand that I need to be able to not only view, I need to look at what the business model is for the organization.
Yes.
My first job, if you will, as an executive, as a leader of an organization, is to make sure the organization is financially sound, is stable. That's the first place that you start. Then you start building upon that. Well, how do I do that? Oh, oops, it's the people. So, all right, so let me make sure that the people are good. Once the people are straight, the people are good. How do I build upon that? Oh, I got to build on the culture. So it is a stepping stone. You start with the fundamental and the basics, and then you continue to build upon that. And I think that that's where sometimes the pieces are missing because we stop at A and we don't go to B and C and D and E. We
Mm.
just stop at A because we're dealing with the financial viability of the organization and we're not thinking about who's making the organization sound and viable. It's the people.
Hmm.
It's the
Hmm.
culture. Because if you don't have a great culture, your retention strategy is gonna go up the roof. You're just simply not going to be able to maintain your folks. So it starts with one, and you kind of continue to build upon it.
So I want to add something. Again, I want to also provide space. If you want to chime in on it, please do. Um, a perspective that you got me thinking about is um, so GPS Leadership Solutions. Like, we do a lot of executive leaders development and training, but many organizations actually initially engage us via
Mhm.
retreats and team building workshops, so multi-day things. And the funny thing is that everything you just said, um, that is where having that space together is where kind of all these things kind of bubble up and people can
Mhm.
actually talk about it. And what I'm also hearing is that from an organizational standpoint, we have to be very, as we're doing our best to develop these very um, high profile individuals and high performance individuals and so on and so forth, we have to make sure we're not putting in systems that encourage behavior that is detrimental to what our ultimate goal is. So if we
Yeah.
have policies and reward systems that says, oh, well, if Tony only works on his section and his section elevates here, then he gets a bonus. But if Tony says, oh, well, there's a way for I can work with this other organization, I'm not going to get as big of a return on mine, but it's best for the organization. But he looks at, hey, I'm not going to get a reward from this. My performance may be dinged because I didn't get X, Y, and Z. Like you, as an organization, be very wary or very cognizant of the systems that we put into place because they may be detrimental to our overall growth.
Yeah, you have to really look at that in a space where it has to be, it can't be linear. And what I mean by that is this: you can't stovepipe and be in your one little area if you're an executive. It just simply won't work. Uh, and it troubles me to say that, but that's the truth of the matter. It just simply won't work. Um, where I've always ascribed to is that I have to be a link between all of the departments, and also find space where there's some level of collaboration. And when you walk into a space where you're being collaborative and you're being open, it's not as if you're trying to take over anyone else's area. It is that, hey, I'm providing these synergies that my unit or my area can provide to you, and for us to grow together. And those leaders have to be open and willing to have that dialogue. Not only that dialogue, but they have to be open and willing to the collaboration. Uh, Again, with zero expectation that there is any ROI that's there. I'm looking at how this would manage or help the organization as a whole, not you as an individual or me as an individual, but the organization.
Last thing, I'm gonna open it. Literally, I'm gonna open it up to you. Again, what I'm hearing here is again what we always work on is the sounds comes back to trust.
Yeah.
Um, we have to trust that I'm looking out for you, you're looking out for me, and build a culture and systems both around win-win. Because I wish many, many, many more leaders were like you and thought like you, Tony. And so many leaders that we end up working with are like, look, I love to worry about someone else or some other division, but I need to secure these resources for my team. And if
Yeah.
I got it, if it's my team or their team, it's my team all day. And there can be a conversation like, hey, look, how can we both or all win? How can we look across this together? But again, many organizations unintentionally, very
Yeah.
unintentionally, create these silos and create these situations where divisions are fighting amongst themselves for the limited resources.
Yeah.
Um, Tony, can I open the floor for you? Is there anything like you'd like to share or say with our audience before we wrap up? And if you're liking what he's saying, audience, please, you right now, not you, not don't look to left, you, click the like, comment below. We want to hear from you. Go on, Tony, please.
Okay, great. I think in my closing remarks, Alice, I want to say again, thank you for the opportunity to chat with you today. One of the things that's forefront for me, it continues to be diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think that we are moving into a space what I call DEI 2.0. And moving forward, we're going to have to be intentional in how we do our recruitment, how we do our retention strategies, how we do promotions, because as we move forward, we're going to have to make sure that we understand that our workforce is more diverse now than it has ever been. We actually now have six generations that are in the workplace. So we're going to have to look at how we meet the needs for each and every one of the individuals in each of those generations and meet those folks where they are. Um, And the last piece that I would say is you spoke a little bit about leadership retreats and things of that aspect. What I would caution leaders in that space is this: we can have as many leadership retreats as we want, we can have as many surveys as we want, but if we're not going to action the data that comes out of that and do the work at the close of those things, there's money down the drain and it is time that is not well spent. And when I say money, I'm talking about the resources for the retreat itself. I'm talking about the time for the leaders that were there. It is just, it turns into a waste, and it really comes back, and your other leaders will look at you and say that this was a check the box exercise and that they do not want to be engaged in that again. So you really don't want to be in that space.
Tony, you preaching over here. Everyone, first of all, Tony, thank you so much for joining us here today. I know you just shared so much valuable insight, and I know everyone who's listening to this is loving it, because I promise you, if I grew, someone else out here was growing. And if you found anything of value from today's episode, don't keep it to yourself. Don't just look back and say that person over there should have been here, could have been here. Say, nah, I'm bringing this person to the table. I'm going to share this information with them today. So go and click the share, right? Click the like, share, engage. I encourage everyone, as always, don't just look back, reach back, and stay strong, stay positive, and definitely stay moving. See ya. Thanks for listening to The Executive Appeal with Alex Tremble. I invite you to follow The Executive Appeal wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow me, your host, Alex Tremble, across all socials or via email for exclusive webinars, courses, and speaking engagements on continued topics of executive leadership. So until next time, stay strong, stay positive, and definitely stay moving.